So, shall we? Yeah! How are you doing? How was lunch? When did you get there? So that makes it short. I don't think that it's the time slot to blame, but maybe it is. Now that we know who to blame, we can close all the conference and just leave home. Okay, so this talk's going to be about DevOps. Yay! Who's doing DevOps? Who wants to be doing DevOps? Who doesn't want to be doing DevOps? Who knows what DevOps is? I don't. But I have slides and I have a microphone, so you're stuck with me. My name is Gil. I think this is my fifth or sixth time here. Those people never learn. What I do in my spare time is working with all kinds of people, developers, testers, product people, and others, DevOps people, help them create better software. In the spare of my spare time, I also write a book called Everyday Unit Testing. And in the spare of my spare time, I'm also part of a small startup called Fasti. And then I go back home to Twitter, and that's basically it. So everybody's talking about DevOps. What is DevOps? Oh, you came to learn what DevOps is. Oh, that's a problem. So everybody's talking these days, right? So about DevOps and everything. Who has like groups or teams of DevOps in their organization? Yeah. Do you know what they're doing behind the curtain when you're allowed to feed them? See them twice a week. So how did it came to be that DevOps became such a buzzword? Okay, so yeah. I hope it wasn't as painful as this thing in the organization. When I started learning about DevOps, I went to the source. And the source is, of course, Wikipedia. I was looking for a definition. And the definition I found was this. I'm sorry, don't fall asleep for the next 15 seconds as I read it. A culture, movement, or practice that emphasizes the collaboration and communication of both software developers and other information technology professionals while automating the process of software and delivery and infrastructure changes. Everything's clear now, right? Not sure who wrote this. I hope they revoke his rights to edit Wikipedia. So that's not helpful. We need to go back in time to understand where these DevOps things came from. Okay, we went a bit too far in time. Let's see. Yeah, okay. The Agile Manifesto, 2001, not too long. Everybody knows what the Agile Manifesto is, right? You came to the right conference. So the Agile Manifesto talked about these things on the left, which are better than the things on the right. And they come in bold and flashy things like individuals and interactions, because we found out that software is made by humans, and working software, which is going to be basically the crux of this talk, because we actually wanted to deliver something that works. We didn't know that before the Agile Manifesto. We also talked about collaboration with the customers, internal customers, and so on, and our ability to respond to change, to adapt when things that we didn't expect happen. So let's take these things and like paste it all over the definition. So we see things that, like, now things are bubbling up. We see the collaboration bit, and we see the practices, and we see the communication, developers and other information technology professionals, and software delivery. So we see that there is some kind of relationship between them. The IT professionals, the other IT professionals, who are they? Well, in the past there were those guys. I'm not sure if you've seen the series, the IT, right? Yeah. So the IT guys, these were the ones when I wanted to do something outside and write software, they will take care of that. I needed a new computer, they will get me a computer. 3 months later, but they will get me a computer. I wanted something installed, they will give me the forms I have to fill in order to have the software there. They would take care of licenses, they would take of creating all kinds of environments. So it's them. It's everything that we thought is outside developing software. And this is the origin of DevOps. Now, before I go in, a couple of disclaimers. If you have a specific DevOps team, that's not really agile. Okay? Yeah. If you discovered it now, go back to the beginning, change it, and come back. Yeah, so we know that. Second thing is that DevOps is not just about automation. It is, a lot of it is about automation. But we think about DevOps as a set of skills that automate stuff. We miss out on a lot of things. Okay? But since you're not going to listen to me anyway, and you're going to be half asleep anyway, so I'm going to continue talking. So why is it so shiny? Why is everybody's talking about, except the people who didn't hear about it? But yeah, so a few things happened over the last 10 years, and I apologize, there's going to be some text in the next slide, apart from big letters, that kind of created an environment which we came to a conclusion someone needs to take care of. And there's a couple of them. So we discovered that complexity is all around us. Now, I was here last year complaining about complexity, so if you've been here, I apologize. If not, you pick up the recording and then I'll apologize later. Things have become a lot more complex than we thought around software. Okay? So with Amazon and cloud, and now we're talking about serverless computer that we don't install or own the storage where our software runs, but we still need to manage it. So this is something that's new. And we need some ways to do that. Second thing is that with that comes the question of what is an environment? Because here's a story. 97, 98, when I was in the army, I was writing image application software for something with tanks. It was always something with tanks. And when I wrote my software, I actually shipped my computer, not their software. So it was a very big car that took my computer. Yes, shipping an environment is something that kind of very flexible, fungible, agile these days, right? We can create virtual machines that can have anything in there. We have the tools like Docker and Puppet, and we need those. And sometimes we need to manage those things because we can't have too many VMs because licenses and stuff, and who has which environment and how is it different than what we have. And how is it different than what I as a developer have, than you as a tester, than what's actually running in the cloud. Another thing happened along with Agile really, is that before that, the gatekeepers were the operation guys. If I needed to do something as a developer or someone on the developer team, need to do something in production, they said, first you have to do this and this and this and this and prove that you're not ruining anything. And if you prove to us, we'll let you do that. And that took like 3 months. Now, with Agile as part of it, but more a business environment that we're talking about, handling these things in productions becomes necessary to be frequently doing that. And we know that Amazon and Facebook, they deploy like, I don't know, hundreds times a day. So it's not like because they have fun doing it. It's a business necessity. I'm not responsible to that. What was it? My mic might be responsible for that. So this has changed, and we need to manage that as well and operate within these environments. The good thing that happened is that we have more tools, we trust automation more, we have a lot of experience garnered from automating all kinds of pieces of code. Currently, we're able to automate full environments and deployment and so on. So we're developing the tools in order to manage the business expectations, really, that come out of these complexities. But with these things come a set of new questions, like, what is a version? It used to be very clear what the software version is, because when we released version number 3, we knew what version 3 is. But do you know what feature toggles are? Somebody using feature toggles? Yeah. So when you deploy something with a feature toggle and it's off, is this feature in the version or not? It depends. Is the feature complete? If it's toggled on in some areas but somewhere else it's off, is it really on? It's like a tree in the woods. And new questions. So if something fails in production, how do we fix it? So if we had like a rollback mechanism, we'll go back to the old version. Now if we don't know what the version is, how can we roll back to it? If we deploy like 500 times a day, what does rolling back to a different previous version is? Very interesting and deep and philosophical questions, but also very practical. What is an environment? What really classifies an environment? Is it just services that run? If, for example, I'm running off a testing environment that has a database installed, and this database already has a schema and some initial data. Is this an environment? Is it different than a database without the initial data? How these environments correlate to something that's going to test in different stages? How does it correlate to something that's going to run in production? And the process of release becomes a lot more complex. Because when is something ready to be released? When we're doing a release with some kind of feature toggle, and we don't flip the toggle when it's in production, is it released or not? If we turn it off after it was turned on, are we still in the same version? So all kinds of new questions about methodology. So that's a lot to answer, and try to answer those things as we go in. But first, I'm going back to the Agile Manifesto and ask you, what is working software? Because after all, this is what we're after. So what is working software? Definition of done. What else? Meets our expectations. Very good. Maybe you saw the slide before. Yeah. What else? Solving customer needs. Okay. When I'm saying that I've finished development, okay, and let's say you're a tester, we work at the same sprint, and you say, yeah, I've tested it, it's fine, okay, but we don't ship it, okay, yet, because, is it working? We don't know what working is. We need to define what working is, really, because working for us might be different than working for the customer, which it isn't really, because it's not shipped. So this is my definition of what is working software. It has to be developed, it has to be tested. Meets our expectations. Because whatever we build, and assuming that we built that in a very agile manner, you and I worked together, we understood what we're building, we understood why we're building it, and we build something that is best for our standards. We know that it's doing what it needs to do, and it's doing it to the quality level of what we expected it. But that might be different than what the customer expects, because our expectations are might be a bit different Usually who's working with a customer? With an actual customer, not a representative. Oh, okay. So most of you do not talk with customers on a regular basis. Okay, we talk with product owners, business analysts, something. So we're working through a translation unit, okay, which are usually different people. Different people have different assumptions, different experiences, different expectations. So if it's working, it will probably do what the customer actually needs at the end. And all this was something that was always true, but today we have something else. Because things are getting deployed and released frequently, and we had release 3.0 last week, and now we have sort of release 3.01, we're talking about working software that is working continuously over time. Things have not been broken, things have not changed, the new stuff works, and all of the above. And it continues to be that because we're going to continue deploying stuff and we expect things to continue working. So our expectations have changed because of the environment, which is a very loaded term. I try not to repeat it too many times. So basically we're talking about working software everywhere. And what I'm going to do, something that I have developed specifically for this talk, are these glasses. These are the Agile glasses. And the Agile glasses, we're going to use them when we look at different practices that DevOps do, whatever DevOps do, and we looked at what they're doing in terms of how does this relate to Agile, okay? While the Agile manifesto is like abstract things and talks about interaction and collaboration, and working software is not really defined what working software really is. We'll try to, they're not really complete, so I've managed to do like 3 features in them. The first one is looking through them and seeing how we handle risks. Okay, because every Agile methodology has some kind of risk management inside it. We want to minimize risk. The second thing that it has is minimizing waste. Right? Everything that we do that doesn't contribute to value is kind of a waste. And most Agile methodologies think about this and say, okay, how are we going to do that? And the third thing that complements this is feedback. Usually early feedback is better. And if we get early feedback, we minimize risks. Put something out there, see how it works, get the feedback, decide if we're going to continue or we're going to pivot. And it also helps us minimize the waste. Because if we pivot early, we don't waste our work, our time, our resources on doing something that will not give us value. So these 3 are important. Let's start by looking at, we said working software is everywhere. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is what is working software in a development environment. So what kind of things do DevOps people do to help us in the development environment? Now, you probably identify source control as something that is weird. Now, who's not using source control? Okay, that was a trick question. Nobody fell for it. Yeah, I know. Sometimes it works. Yeah, everybody's using source control. Why is everybody using source control? What makes it better than copying files to the network? It actually answers needs that we have in development. Okay, so it's not just backup. It used to be, the beginning was backup, but you can go back and see history and version. It actually answers a need. So we know that we need that. And in the beginning, and even today, the people who install a new source control server, if they picked Perforce, for example, these are the people who will create the trunks and the server itself and permissions and all kinds of clever hooks that either accelerate or decelerate our advantage and so on. So these are the IT remnants of the DevOps operation. But like we said, it's not like there's one way to work with sources. Who works on the trunk all the time? Okay. The others either don't know or work on feature branches or something like that. Now, we have to have some kind of methodology in the organization of how we work that. And it doesn't matter if we actively created one because our experience showed that there's a giant fly outside making a lot of noise. I think we heard it in the streets of Kiev yesterday. But yeah, where was I? Yeah, branching. Okay, so it doesn't matter if he just got there by accident or hired someone with a lot of experience to create a methodology and said, this is how we're going to work. But a lot of this is around minimizing risk and minimizing waste. Okay, we don't want to lose something that we did. We don't want to waste time on very big mergers. So we need some kind of methodology that will help us move forward. Continuous integration. Who has a continuous integration tool? Who has a continuous integration strategy? Not the same people. Yeah, Jenkins is a continuous integration tool. It says so on the box. Okay? Sort of, the virtual box. But continuous integration is actually doing integration all the time on the trunk. It's a methodology. Okay? It does this to reduce risks and waste and get early feedback. So the IT guys and now the DevOps guys need to understand this, not just as a tool that they install. This applies directly to how we develop software, and all this is still on the developer machine. The final thing that complements this are unit tests and integration tests that basically run in isolation. Regardless of how an environment looks like, and we'll talk about that in a minute, these run they can run in the dirtiest box that developers have ever dirtied. So they run in isolation, they tell you if something's broken, so on. So this makes me say, okay, this is working here on my computer. Yeah. Apparently, that's not enough. It was enough 20 years ago when I shipped my computer to the field, but not anymore. So we needed a bit more. And the first stage to get there is to move the software out of my computer, because that's a risky business, my computer. So now we started to add layers of what activities DevOps people do. The first thing is package management, because we need to understand what needs to be deployed where and at what time. Okay? So, for example, I work with teams that they have sites globally. Some of them work on different features within themselves. Some of them integrate with others. And there's some kind of knowledge, either documented or not documented, of what needs to be packaged and deployed where and when and it's going to need it, and when do we deploy something when they need it and not before they actually need it, because it might ruin their problems to go home at Friday at 5. Okay? So this whole thing of package management, not the tooling. The tooling is implicit inside there. So package management, what does the package include? And obviously automation, because if we do it manually, it's going to waste a lot of our time, and we're going to start killing people, because that's not really a challenge. And the second thing, automatic deployment. Again, we want to minimize the risk of making mistakes, minimize the waste of doing this manually, and does it answer early feedback? Yeah, if the script succeeds, we'll know as quickly as possible. And that means we have ability to deploy working software as far as we know away from my computer, which is a good thing. I think we all agree. But is that enough? You are hesitating, which makes me shiver. No, it's not enough. We need to pray that it works. Did you pray? Did you ever pray that something works? The people who are laughing actually did it. Okay, I recognize the laugh. I did it myself. So, okay, yeah, you do that. But other than this, we should have tried other methodologies of delivery. So testing, yeah. So this was where we're actually starting to think about environments. So we took it on ourselves to say that the development environment is dirty. We call it a sandbox. We call it something else sometimes. But we know that whatever happens in a certain developer at a certain time on his machine can never, ever, ever be reproduced. We can't go back in time like with the dinosaurs. But with testing, we try to actually do that, okay, because it will help us. So now we're starting to talk about environments. What defines an environment? What does it consist of? What we need in order to do things within this environment? And like I said in the beginning, we're talking about all kinds of environments, how technologically dealing with them, deploying them, extracting them, defining them, of course. And it's usually more than one environment. Because who has a testing environment and some kind of pre-production staging environment? And that's the minimum, right? You can have different things, different environments you can test on. Okay, so this has to be managed as well. When we start doing this, we started talking about having some kind of feedback cycles that are not either unit tests or not, or unit tests or manual. Okay, start to have the ability to create environments and therefore run longer flows and get the result. Now, this might not be the quickest test. These might not be the most accurate test to tell you that if something failed, this is here, the bug is here. But when they passed, we can sleep better at night. So we start adding all kinds of tests, end-to-end tests. Sometimes it's not entirely end-to-end. Sometimes it's API to the database. Sometimes it's UI to the database, but talking to a simulator because we don't have a third party. But we set all this up, and we have functional. We can add more tests to that, like the non-functional tests, like load tests, reliability tests. Don't know what else. Music test. I don't know. Usability test we can't really do with computers. We can, but once Skynet is ready, we can start doing that. So we have the ability to say, okay, we need all these things running, and testers have the capability to define these tests. Some of them write them, but they need the support of what we're actually going to run, because that's not easy. This is where DevOps come in again into the team and help us. So we have something that is working in testing environment. Are we ready? Okay. Okay. I can stare at this for 15 minutes, but then I'll be out of time. Yeah, shipping. We actually need to get it into some kind of production environment. Now, I used the car 20 years ago. That doesn't work anymore. So, what is shipping? So, like I said before, we need to know what we're shipping. What is this version we're talking about? And do you remember the times that we pulled down the server for a weekend and went into the office and pulled out a nice under construction slide on the site, and then we'll go home when we're finished at Sunday at midnight or something like that. Yeah, this doesn't work anymore. Imagine Amazon doing that. Okay? So deploying, it's not just deploying, pressing a button, and it gets deployed. We need to think about how we keep monitoring and running the things in production until it is deployed. So we need this information. We need the skill to do that. Obviously, we can automate stuff with continuous deployment. Who has some kind of continuous deployment? What is some kind? Okay, the unknown kind. Continuous deployment, again, it's exactly like continuous integration. Okay? It's not a tool. It's not automation. It's a methodology of pushing things into production but it includes like having a whole bunch of automated tests running because you don't want to propagate the risks forward. So we have these kind of things and skills and tech that we need to do. Obviously, automatic deployment somehow got away to this slide after I removed it. I don't know how. Bugs will happen even in PowerPoint. And then we'll have to deal with rolling backwards, if it's possible, rolling forward. It's a methodology. This is how we're going to work from now on. We need to define this. We need to define all kinds of risks that we want to manage. And obviously, pushing something that has gone through all our lists of tests can still wreak havoc because we haven't thought about everything in the beginning. Who heard about canary releases? Okay, so canary releases is when you put something out in production, sometimes in silent mode, sometimes you expose it to a very small portion of the customers to see how it's working, to see if it's working well and not killing everything on the side. So we need to do something even after it is deployed and shipped. So we do the post-deployment testing. Obviously, we want to know that if the feature is working. We need to know if the other stuff is still working, and we need to follow up on the new stuff to see what's happening. So these are methodologies, these are procedure practices, and some include technologies that we need to do. Are we done yet? No, people hesitate. Must have 1, 2, 3 things on, yeah. I do. Even working software that was released today, we can't say that it's really working. Because we need to monitor it. Because sometimes I work with another team that they have to wait 3 days, something like that, until a new feature is in production to say it is working. Because they need to collect all kinds of data that cannot be collected like this. Sometimes it's weeks. So we need to do all kinds of monitoring. And we need to have reports that pull out in information that is important to us. Because we can monitor a lot of things. But we need to identify in advance what is important. So we call them KPIs or something. OKRs, whatever. And chaos monkeys, who heard about chaos monkeys? I had a chaos monkey on my shoulder yesterday. I wasn't willing to do that, but he got there anyway. A chaos monkey, something that originated in Netflix. And basically, and I saw something, a new presentation, they have something called Chaos Kong, because the monkeys got bigger. What they're doing is proactively shutting down parts of the system, the production system, to see how it's working. Now, that may scare people. Why is that? Not why they scare them. Why do they do that? They're testing 2 things. First, that the technology works. They identify the problems. They have the ability to solve the problem sometimes. And the second is that the organization works. How do the support engineers, the testers, sometimes the tech support that answer the calls, how does the whole organization work when something like that happens? And they proactively do that. And the reason they proactively do this is because when we started developing this stuff, we didn't think about what will happen. Complexity. So all this has to be infused into the team. And is that enough? Yeah, remember when he said that it actually needs to solve something for the users? So sometimes we get some kind of surprises. And we need to actually do that. So in order to do that, not to handle surprises, but to learn to live within an uncertain environment, we need to do stuff. So obviously, feature tokens are a technique that we're using in order to minimize risk and learn stuff. If the new feature is useful, is it usable, whatever. But the whole thing about lean startup is taught us that we need to build MVPs. What is MVPs? Minimal viable product. What is the purpose of a minimum viable product? Learning, learning, learning. MVPs are about learning. We do this through experimentation. We hope to do this by failing fast, if possible, but also succeeding if our hypotheses are correct. So again, we minimize risk, we minimize waste, we get early feedback. And this has to be thought of way back when the product person, when the business analyst has some idea. And when we do this, we plan this, we have to have the involvement of the DevOps people, because they can tell us what they're able to monitor. Developers need to put in the feature toggles, whatever things that we're going to log afterwards in order for them to get the reports that we need. Everything fits together. Okay, so that's data extraction, A/B testing, all kinds of things. And versioning, what are we going to test, where and how? Well, we need to think about all these things together. Because it's hard to fit these things in the end. Very hard, impossible really. Okay, some things you get like from browsers and stuff like that, but the things that you actually are after, they're not there. Okay. So, what did we talk about? What's so strange about it? So DevOps are a lot of things, as we saw, and that's just a bit of it. Okay? But if we look at it from the glasses that I showed you that Spock was wearing, you can actually think about all these activities that kind of new, because they came to existence only in the last 10 years and maybe 5 years, but it is an extension of what Agile was thought to be, the ability to create working software. So in the beginning, we needed developers and testers to work together, okay, and product people too. And then we had all kind of automation that helped us, and source control. Now we need new stuff. In 5 years, we'll probably need a lot of new stuff. But the key thing is that everything goes back to the team. This knowledge, however big it is, needs to be controlled and understood by the team. Because if it's not, we're creating waterfall all over again. Not a good thing by itself, but we know that Agile is better. So what is DevOps? Is it the new Agile? Is it an extension of Agile? I don't know. It's a nice name. It's a cool name. It helps us attract people to the position we think they should be in the organization. It helps us to think of the organization as having some kind of capabilities. But the truth is that if you want working software all over the place, you need to go back to Agile. Thank you very much. Do you have questions, or you just want to go to sleep? I do. Excellent. First victim, yeah.
If you have one DevOps in the team, like average agile team, like 7 plus minus 2, how long does it take to implement all those practices in like those like some middle-sized project? I don't know. Like
it really depends of what the project is, what the requirements are.
Technologies, right?
The knowledge is usually either
Technologies.
people. I look at knowledge, technology, practices, all these things that the team needs to adapt. Now, do they need all these things right at the beginning of a new startup? No. Probably not. Do they need to do it at the same quality that they will be doing in 3 or 6 months? Not. So it's very contextual. But the thing is, the Best practices that we're talking about, 5-year max of experience that you'll find. So even the people with experience have not had that much experience. Mm-hmm. It's like if I asked you, how long will it take to implement automated testing? Depends on the people, culture, everything that you said. But you're thinking technologically again, not humanly again. It really depends on. 1 minute, and I'll get back to you. Let's say that you have a DevOps team or like a DevOps community. One person. What do you? No, that's not a good question. So much like as do you need to get here? I don't know. So setting up the source control and continuous integration, great. Somebody using that for the next year, not so much. So is it useful? Work with teams that have Jenkins like for 3 years now. Haven't written a single test. So, but they spend a lot of time on Jenkins for some strangers. Yeah.
Thank you, Gil. Your presentation was named Agile Introduction to DevOps. So I wonder how would it be if you proposed to take non-agile introduction to DevOps? How would it be?
How would that be? It will probably show you a set of tools and what you need to do. And if you're not doing that, you're not DevOps or Agile. Probably, guessing.
The last question. Anyone?
Thank you. I was feeling lonely. Yeah. Go ahead.
Could you please give 3 top arguments for implementation of this approach to business guy?
Okay. Top 3 arguments. Hate to say this word, but basically productivity, our ability to deploy at the pace that we want. Quality is usually better. Basically, it goes back to minimizing risk, minimizing waste, and early feedback. All these things are built around this to give both ourselves, the internal teams, and the customers and the people in between, enough feedback and control to minimize risk and waste. Usually, the executives understand these. Usually. Yes. So much for automated testing and less coding, but people don't see it why less coding is more valuable. There is no, you do this, you'll get this. It's the values and principles behind it, which makes sense because we understand them here. If the people don't understand them, go back to Agile first. Try to explain that. Create bubbles. Here it works. Okay, I'm going to be here until tomorrow afternoon, so if you have other questions or want to argue considerably, I'm here. Thank you very much.